Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Let's look at a piece of a policy plank introduced by President Trump as he's running and leading the Republican field for a second term in office. What he plans to do in office with that second term is maybe an undercovered story at the moment as we go through these Republican primaries. President Trump is talking about founding a free federal online university, and here's how he explains it in the video that he posted to Truth Social.
We will take the billions and billions of dollars that we will collect by taxing, fining, and suing excessively large private university endowments, and we will then use that money to endow a new institution called the American Academy. Its mission will be to make a truly world-class education available to every American, free of charge, and do it without adding a single dime to the federal debt. This institution will gather an entire universe of the highest quality educational content covering the full spectrum of human knowledge and skills and make that material available to every American citizen online for free. This will be a truly top-tier education option for the people. It will be strictly non-political, and there will be no wokeness or jihadism allowed. None of that's going to be allowed.
Monet, what do you make of this idea? The full spectrum of human knowledge available online for free.
Well, I think that the best thing you can say about Trump's plan is that he's tapping into an actual widespread feeling among the American populace, which is that education is far too expensive and far too unproductive, that we have students taking out thousands of dollars in loans and often ending up with poor credentials that don't actually qualify them for any kind of gainful employment. And so it's basically the same instinct you saw President Biden take with student loan forgiveness. The idea that even if my plan is questionable on the practical or legal merits in Biden's case, I know that some voters are going to reward me because they just want to see the president of the United States proposing something that's going to alleviate the burden of debt and the problem of a lot of students graduating and being unable to find jobs. So I think President Trump probably, if you were to really drill down, would know that what he's proposing is fanciful, but thinks that it would get some press and gin up some excitement among his base. But of course, as you implied, on the practical merits, it's a terrible plan. The idea of having the federal government offer a free education to the masses, it just doesn't seem as if it's the sort of thing that the standard bearer of the Conservative Party ought to be floating, given the disasters we've seen through the decades with every other form of involvement the federal government has in higher education.
Kim, a couple thoughts that occur to me. One is that there are already alternatives to big state colleges, to Ivy League colleges. Hillsdale, Ben Sasse is now running the University of Florida. Ron DeSantis is turning one of the schools down there into a sort of classical liberal arts college. And so why does Trump think that the federal government would be a good competitor in this space, and particularly with online learning? About a decade ago, there was enormous hype around massive open online courses. And there's a lot of schools that have dumped video lectures from eminent professors on the internet. One of them is Open Yale Courses. You can go on there and find, for example, Psychology 110, Introduction to Psychology, taught by Professor Paul Bloom. You can watch that if you want. Political science, physics, philosophy, history. There's all sorts of resources available to people. And so the idea, I think, that the federal government is the answer to this problem, I'm pretty skeptical of.
Yeah, that's my problem, is just how corrosive this is to the long-time conservative view of a limited federal government. Let's keep that in mind. Look, there are some of us out there, we may be a fading few, who still would like to get rid of the Department of Education, which was a Jimmy Carter creation done to buy off the unions to get his reelection endorsement. And I'm still hard-pressed to think of a single good thing that enormous department does in Washington. States were supposed to always be the places of education policy. Even Jimmy Carter admitted that when he came up with this idea and had all kinds of excuses for why the federal government should have, in his words, a limited role. Of course, that role has only expanded over time. And now you have the leading Republican contender for the nomination out there suggesting that we increase the federal government's role in higher education by creating a new institution that would, in theory, compete against different conservative alternatives that are now popping up. And we are seeing those, okay? You're seeing changes at college campuses. I know that it's slower than some conservatives would like, but you now have alumni and parents and donors who are dropping their donations because of the way they see universities being run. We've got new administrators like former Senator Ben Sasse at the University of Florida. We have people that are trying to replicate the Hillsdales of the world. There's a new university that was put together by venture capitalists Joe Lonsdale and Mark Andreessen and Barry Weiss, the free speech advocate. The University of Austin, which is now open for applications for its first classes. So there are changes out there. And yet the president or former president is suggesting that Americans stump up a bunch of tax dollars for this centralized federal university that's going to compete with these conservative alternatives. And somehow with the weird belief that it's going to operate better than the DMV and that it's not going to be taken over or sabotaged the next time there's a Democratic president in office.
That's the other thought, is that President Trump might promise that there would be no wokeness at this federal online university, but he can't keep that guarantee for the next person who is sitting in the Oval Office. By the way, we just had a big experiment in mass online learning during COVID, and it turns out that students hate it, and not just kindergarten students, but college students. They couldn't wait to get back to campus after COVID was over. And Monet, we'll give you the last word, but I think it's worth talking about some of these policy proposals. We are still in early days of the primaries. It probably doesn't feel that way, but we're still months away from any votes being cast. And it seems to me that it's worth discussing what these candidates intend to do. And for President Trump, the way to find those, it seems, is to go on Truth Social. That seems to be the place where he lets his hair down, so to speak.
That's right. And I think that the proposal for the federal Trump U is another example of how Trump really speaks only to his own base. He's not out there trying to appeal broadly to Republican voters at large. He knows that he has a commanding lead in the polls in almost every state. In fact, I believe in every state. And so he is focused on doing things that keep him in the headlines, keep excitement up among his supporters and his small dollar donors. And so that means you're going to get outlandish statements and in some cases outlandish policy plans. Whereas the approach that the other candidates need to be taking is thinking about what do I need to do to distinguish myself among those voters who are turned off by Trump? And that means they're going to offer a much higher class of policy proposal that show the direction that they would actually take the party. So it's important that everyone realize that Trump and his competitors are playing completely different games here.
Thank you, Monet and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.